I've been thinking, just in light of the whole story in my neighborhood that I've told you about so many times, and that we're still struggling with this ongoing crisis, this ongoing pedophile crisis, which, as I've told you quite a few times, Maariv newspaper has said that this is the largest pedophile crisis, pedophilia case of its kind in Israeli history. And it happened right in my neighborhood. In fact, most of it happened, a lot of it happened on my small little block. So we're still dealing with this, and basically I've been speaking with a lot of people and like different rabbis and rebbitzins and trying to get some sort of feeling of like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how am I supposed to, react to this? And people have said, people have been telling me over and over, like when there's darkness, like my job is to bring some sort of light to the situation. So I read something very, very beautiful in the Netivot Shalom. And I wrote about this. I wrote like a short blog post about this the other week, but I wanted to sort of speak about it more at length. What basically the Netivot Shalom writes about a situation in which you are living in a situation which is like the situation, which is like the world before the Mabul, the world before the flood. So as probably most of us know, most of you know, so what was going on before the flood? Why did the flood happen? It was because there was violence and because there was sexual impropriety, and just sort of sexual violence, also in weird sexual things happening. And so basically, when my chavruta and I were reading this, my dear chavruta Efrat, who also lives in the neighborhood, we just looked at each other and we're like, we cannot believe that we happened upon this specific Netivot Shalom, because it sounds like it's speaking so specifically about our case today in Nachlaot, violence against children, sexual, sort of totally a messed up, warped sort of sexual situation, which is exactly what we had here, with people, molesting and raping very, grown men, molesting very young children. It was just crazy. So the Netivot Shalom explains. So he basically gives directions, step by step, what you are supposed to do when you're living in a case like ours, living in a situation like Nachlaot 2011. So he explains, so how did Noah save himself from the Mabul, save himself from this flood and from all these terrible things happening? He shut himself up in an ark, in a teva. So the Netivot Shalom says, so what is the ark nowadays? We don't actually have a physical ark, so what is the ark nowadays? So he says a few things. He says the first ark that we need to close, when you're living in a time in dark times, when you're surrounded by impurity, the first ark that you need to close yourself up into is the ark of the Torah. Okay? Close yourself up into, fill yourself up with Torah learning. I know, for me, my favorite magazine is The New Yorker. And my parents bring me, basically every time my parents visit, then they bring me 30 or 40 New Yorkers that they save up. And this is my favorite thing. When I go to the gym, every day for a short amount of time, and I go on the treadmill and I read my New Yorkers. But the truth is that over the past few weeks, I haven't been reading my New Yorkers. I've been reading, I feel this really, really urgency, this real need to fill myself up more with holiness, with Kedusha. So I bring myself, a Jewish holy book to read, or I read my Rabbani Imima Parsha sheets, or I read my issue of Bina or of Mishpacha magazine, and to fill myself up not with the New Yorker, I love the New Yorker, but to fill myself up with something holy. I feel really a need for it in this sort of dark times when you feel so much impurity, to fill myself up with purity. Okay. And the second ark, the second teva that the Netivot Shalom recommends, is to close ourselves up in the ark of of Shabbat Kodesh, of the holy Shabbat. I love Shabbat, but since I read this, it's really been making me focus on Shabbat as just this sort of as this really sanctuary within the week. It's like a sanctuary within time, So this feeling the holiness of that, and having for a while when initially the news came out about the crisis in the neighborhood, then we just couldn't have we stopped having guests altogether. We went from having many guests to having 0 guests. We just couldn't deal with anyone. We just want to sort of close ourselves up into our little house and whatever. But now over the past 2 or 3 weeks, when we started having a big groups of guests again, and it's been a wonderful feeling of just feeling this holiness of Shabbat, and having guests in our home, and singing. My husband loves to sing for a really, really long time, many different songs on Shabbat, and opening the windows and opening the front door, and just letting the songs, this like the songs or the sounds of all this holiness just go out into the street and filling our neighborhood, Bezat Hashem. And it's this powerful thing to feel like, okay, like, you know, there's a lot of impurity out there, and I am closing myself up. As a family, we're closing ourselves up in this, you know, in the ark of Shabbat Kodesh. The third thing is when you're living in a time like before the flood, to close yourself up in an ark of emunah, of faith and hope. And I feel like that's definitely what I've been talked with you about this several times. But this feeling of closing myself up in and filling myself up with emunah, just working all the time, to try and see, you know, I know that there's a reason why I and everyone in this whole story, like all the Nachlo people, there's a reason why we're here. There's a reason why there's something that Hashem wants us to go through. Hashem, I believe that there's some way that we're supposed to grow from this. And it's all the time, you know, like when I hear another piece of bad news about this story, you know, another child affected, another pedophile let free by the authorities, you know, thank God, I'll bet you 3 people, thank God, are in prison. But there are other people who need to be arrested who are not being arrested, and for various, like, you know, whatever reasons that I won't go into, and it's horrific. It's really horrific. But I'm trying to, like, every time I hear like another piece of bad news in this story, just sort of saying, okay, Hashem, like turning to Hashem and saying, okay, Hashem, 10 reasons why this is going to enable me to grow. 10 reasons why this is actually going to be good, why this is ultimately good. 10 reasons, like trying all the time to be working on my emunah, my faith, and my hope that things are going to work out for the best. So it's actually been, in that way, well, it's been a very, 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 very difficult experience for me. This has been one of the most difficult experiences I've ever gone through. It's definitely, I think, probably like one of the top experiences of my life to grow in emunah, like to grow in my faith and okay. The fourth thing, the fourth teva, the fourth kind of arc that the Netivat Shalom recommends you can close yourself up to in this kind of time, is closing yourself up into the arc of achadut, of Jewish unity and acts of chesed, and acts of kindness, to sort of have more Jewish unity, to bring about Jewish unity. So I know, like, probably like most of you watching this, like I try to be like a good person, I try to be nice to people, I try to do like a bit of chesed here and there. But I know, like, since everything's been coming out, I've been feeling this real urgency. You know, there's all this darkness around and all this bad news and all these things going on. I want to, like, bring light. Like, I want to bring light to this neighborhood. So just to give you an example, I have a neighbor who, very unfortunately, an elderly man, who a few years ago, he had a stroke. And then after that, then he was diabetic, and there were sort of complications. I had to, like, cut off his legs. And so I see him a lot, and whenever I speak with him, you know, it's not so pleasant to speak with him because he complains a lot, and whenever it's a bit unpleasant to speak with him. But the other day I was coming back home, and he was sitting in his wheelchair right outside of my house, and I said, you know, and I just feel like this urgency about being, you know, spreading light. So I just said, hi, how are you? It's good to see you. You know, and I said, how are you feeling? And he's like, oh, terrible. I feel terrible. And I listen to him and listen to what he's going through, and I said, you know, Hashem should send you a refuah shlema, that we hear some good news from you. Please, Hashem, you know, this year, you have a refuah shlema, you should feel better, you know. And you know, before this whole crisis, maybe I would have spoken with him, and I would have been nice. But I feel like an urgency about that, you know, being extra kind, giving an extra bright smile to a person in a difficult situation, or, you know, someone who's a widow, or someone who's, you know, someone who doesn't have so many friends, or someone who's, you know, people who not so many people are smiling at them and saying just going for them and saying, Boker Tov, how are you? You know, trying to, like, spread some light, you know, feeling I just feel like a certain urgency about that, like sort of trying to, like, you know, trying to bring the Jewish people closer together through sort of through acts of kindness. Okay, the fifth thing, and this isn't on the Netivat Shalom's list, but something that I've been thinking about, of course, is, you know, that the teva, that something that my teacher, Rabbi Yemima Mizrahi, she tells us every year, that really, like, the ark is the home. You know, the ark is the home. You know, when times of crisis, that you can pull yourself into your house and feel that within these walls are the people that you care about the most in the whole world, and you're all together, and Rabbi Yemima, I just wanted to quote something that Rabbi Yemima taught us this week, and I thought it was exceptionally beautiful. She was talking about marriage, and she said that, you know, many of us are under the impression that the most romantic day of our marriage is the day that we get married. You know, the day when my husband loves me the very, very most, the moment is when he at the Bidekin, he picks up my veil and sees me. But Rabbi Imin explains, no, like that day at the Bidekin, like mamash, it's like nothing. Like there's really like microscopic love there, okay? There's potential for love, but it's like nothing. It's klum, she says. Okay, but she says, when does your husband really love you? He said, your husband, the love that your husband has for you and you have for one another, it grows as you go through the long journey of marriage together. As you go through difficult times, and you go through nisyonot, and you go through crises, and you go through times that are like, similar to, before the flood, is the kind of times I'm talking about. And you go through that together, then through those times, and your love grows. And she explains, when does she said like more than the bidekin, when your husband looks at you at the bidekin, that the love that he feels for you and that you feel for one another is more when you're looking over another person between you. What does she mean? The love that you feel for each other after you've gone through like a difficult pregnancy, and maybe some people difficult trying to get pregnant period, like waiting to get pregnant, going through a difficult pregnancy, in the beginning of pregnancy, in the middle of the pregnancy, and the difficult birth, and after all that, you've gone through it together as a husband and wife, and that you're looking at each other, looking at each other's eyes when you have a baby between you, a newborn baby, like the love that you feel then after going through that journey together. And again, when you have like a child who, like a boy's bar mitzvah or a girl who's bat mitzvah, and after, like, let's say the bar mitzvah, that you and your husband, you're remembering, the sleepless nights and, raising, the toddler's tantrums and the difficulty for him to acclimate to school and difficulty with teacher and difficulty with friends and, this flu and this allergy and all the things you've gone through together to raise this child. And then, you get to the bar mitzvah, and looking at your husband over the child, over this, with this bar mitzvah boy behind you, and the feeling of nachas and the feeling of love that you feel for one another from this shared journey, which isn't always such a smooth one together. She says again, like, imagine how the love that you feel for one another. Once again, as you're looking over, a child who's gotten married, a daughter who's gotten married, or a son who's gotten married, and with that young woman, now a young woman between you in her wedding dress, and knowing like all the things, the teenage years that are usually quite difficult, and getting this child, established in whatever they're doing after high school, and getting this child set up in their life, and like the feeling of all the things that we've been through together, and the love that you feel then. And again, he says, and again, Rabbi Imima says, again, finally, like when you're holding the grandchild, and grandchildren, Bezat Hashem, the grandchild that you're holding, and looking at your husband and knowing like all the things you've gone through, and all like the challenges, and all the getting this young couple set up in their lives together, and the pride and that feeling of like that long journey, and like that basically like that the love just grows and grows and grows as you go through these challenging times together, and pulling through together. That love grows so much when you after that, because of the struggle, not despite the struggles, but because of them. Okay, so I want to bless all of us. I think at this moment in Nachlot, like we're experiencing very much the feeling of being in the world before the flood, before the mumble, because of all the terrible stories coming out now. But the truth is. The whole world today, I think, is really in a state like before the flood. Okay, all the kind of like sexual, total hefkerut, total craziness going on, and violence. But what do? How do we save ourselves from the flood? So how do we save ourselves? So all of us, need to pull ourselves more into Torah, into Torah learning, into surrounding ourselves with holiness as opposed to just like silliness. Okay, pulling ourselves into Shabbat, really connecting with the holiness of Shabbat, growing in emunah and bitachon, like having trying to see Hashem in difficult situations, and having bitachon that Hashem's here, that everything's for a reason, growing, and again like growing in trying to promote Jewish unity through acts of kindness, And the fifth thing, all of Jewish moms, is to be able to feel this in our homes. Knowing that within your home, that your home is a special place. It's like this sanctuary in the world for you and your family. And I want to bless all of you that you should really feel that.